let's make some applesauce this morning. So I was very excited when I went to the farmer's market yesterday to discover that the first apples have come in. Let me grab the bag. So these are called Ginger Gold, and I'm in Southwest Ohio, so it's a little bit early. Usually mid-September is when the apple crop really starts to come to fruition. So the Ginger Gold apple is very, very tart. And I was going to make some apple pie filling because I don't have any on the shelf for apple crisp or apple pies. And I decided that the apple was a little bit too tart, and I'll just wait until a little bit later in the season when I can get some better pie apples. So what I did was I have peeled and cored, this is actually 4 pounds I weighed it, of apples. Put a little bit of water into my enamel coated cast iron pot, and I just let it cook really slow. And you can see the texture here is pretty chunky. So if you like your applesauce absolutely smooth, like you get it in the store out of the jar, you can certainly use a blender. You can use an immersion blender, whatever works best for you to get the chunks out. I personally like the chunky, so that's what I decided to do, is just to leave it chunky this morning. So to that, I have a choice. I can add either raw sugar, which is sort of brown looking, or just regular table sugar. I have never tried making this with brown sugar. I'm not sure from a canning shelf stable standpoint whether brown sugar is the same as white sugar. So I'm going to use the raw sugar instead of just the plain white table sugar. So it's a little bit healthier. So to this amount, to 4 pounds of apples, I'm going to add 1 cup of sugar. I need like more counter space for sure. I love my kitchen some days. All right, so let's stir that in. And the one thing about raw sugar or pure cane sugar, it's a little bit different color, so your applesauce will have a little more of a color look to it if you don't put any cinnamon in it. But it's also a little coarser of a grind, so I find you need to put it into the hot applesauce, give it a really, really good stir, and give it some time for that sugar to liquefy before you try putting it in the jars. You do not want to have grainy applesauce as an end product for sure. So to that, I am going to add some lemon juice. Even though these are really tart apples, I like adding acidity to water bath canned products because, and that was a tablespoon if I didn't say that, acidity and sugar both help shelf life and shelf stability. So when I was cutting the apples, I did put them into lemon water, so there's a little bit of lemon in there anyway. So that's why I only added a tablespoon to this entire batch. Now the fun begins, and you can actually add anything that you want as far as spices. You can add no spices. You can add cinnamon if you can get the lid on. I love cinnamon. It's very good for you, cinnamon, and I buy these organic spices for things that I don't grow at Walmart. But cinnamon actually has been shown to help stabilize blood sugar. So I like putting cinnamon in my steel cut oats. Of course, it goes great with apples, so I'm gonna kind of load up there on some cinnamon. And of course a little for the stove. I don't know if y'all can even see that. So that's a pretty heavy dose as a teaspoon, I think, of this cinnamon, but we're gonna taste it before we start our water bath canning. Now the other thing I personally like, and not everyone likes, is I like cloves. I'm not a big nutmeg fan, but you can add granulated ginger, you can add nutmeg, you can add cloves. One thing to remember about cloves is cloves are very pungent and strong, so I am literally going to add 1/8 of a teaspoon, and I think that's going to be plenty for this amount of applesauce, because I don't know if any of you have ever been to the dentist where they put like something medicated, like a medicated gauze or medicated filling in if you have an irritated tooth or you're getting a root canal. But oil of clove is one of the things that they use in those preparations. So too much clove, you'll feel like you're getting ready for a root canal for sure. So let's take a taste, and because I don't have a spoon, I'm just going to use the teaspoon and see. Ooh, that's hot. They are very tart apples. Honestly, I'm gonna add just a touch more sugar, and then we're gonna call it good. And when we come back here in just a moment, we'll be ready to jar it up and put it in our water bath canner. This is actually a USDA approved recipe. If you have the Ball canning book, I checked several different canning books. The directions were pretty much all the same. You do want to process it depending on your altitude for 20 to 25 minutes in a water bath. So let's get jarring up. All right, well, our applesauce is cooked and I've been busy jarring up, and I thought I would bring you back and just show you a couple of things of note when you're making applesauce. If you're making chunky applesauce, you may want to consider using a wide mouth jar just because it makes loading it a little bit easier. Certainly not a requirement. I actually decided to use an unusual size jar. I am using 1.5 jars. And the reason I decided to do this, and I'm just debubbling here, and then we'll top it off, is I may be utilizing some of these to gift to friends and family. So I thought it looked pretty. So I decided to use the little bit bigger jar. So what I'm doing here is just topping off after debubbling. And you can see, woo, that jar's hot. That we're at about 1/4 inch head space. And the next thing, just like with any water bath canning, you'll want to clean your rim. And this is just a paper towel soaked in vinegar, hot ring and lid. I'm sorry, hot lid and ring, finger tight. And we'll put it in the canner. And again, you do not have to have an electric canner. I just simply am using it because I feel that it puts a lot less heat into my house, and we're still in August dog days. So I'm gonna get busy and load this last jar, but before I do, I wanted to share with you the little device that I was using to peel apples. So this is called a Victorio. They're inexpensive, and I'm telling you, if you're doing bushels of apples and making apple butter and you want an easy way to peel apples, this thing is the bomb. There's a little trick to getting it adjusted, but they have great online videos that you can review. The other thing I wanted to share with you quickly before I load this last jar is I talk a lot about USDA approved recipes. So this is actually the complete guide to home canning put out by the USDA. This is the 2020 edition. I don't find there's anything, magic so much about the recipes. I really rely on the timing and the safety precautions out of this book. So when I start to make something, I have 4 or 5 different resources that I will look at, so I'm assuring safety of the end product. And then finally, to come, future videos. I did splurge and buy myself, like I need another cookbook, the Apple cookbook. But what I will say is I read cookbooks like people read books. So we'll be making some interesting dishes this fall out of the Apple cookbook. So I'm gonna finish loading this canner and I'll bring you back when they're all finished. Well, we're back, and I am delighted to say that I have the equivalent of 6 pints of applesauce now out of the 4 pounds of apples. And I've just taken them out of the canner. They're really hot. You can see there's still water on the top of them. I will just leave them sit here on the counter completely undisturbed for at least 24 hours. And at that time, I will remove the bands. I'll label and date them, wash the jars off, and be able to store them in my pantry. So I hope you enjoyed today's series on how to make applesauce, and I look forward to more apple videos in the near future. Take care.